And fire!
Come to the will of the unsleeping shining officer.
Ikta is a lazy, womanizing man, but he's an undeniable strategic and tactical genius. He wants nothing more than to live a peaceful life, but he's convinced by his longtime friend, Yatori, to take an officer exam to join the war. But after he and his squad rescue the princess, he's made an Imperial Knight, a soldier, and a hero, 3 things he never wanted to be. Although his journey is only beginning, Ikta will eventually come to be known as a great general known as the Invincible Sloth. To quote Shakespeare, some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. The Cat Varna Empire is fighting a losing war against the neighboring Republic of Kyoka. In the Cat Varna Empire, Ikta, an orphan, is pessimistic that the war against Kyoka can be won. With the nudging of his longtime acquaintance Yatori, he agrees to join the war. Yatori is a daughter of the Igzem family, a line of nobles famous for their martial prowess and swordsmanship. As they board their ship, Ikta and Yatori meet their cabin mates. Hiroma, a beautiful woman and older sister of 5, whom Ikta immediately tries flirting with. She's accompanied by her water spirit, Mill. Matthew, a stout man from the Tedrich family who is self-conscious of his line's low status amongst the nobility. He bears the wind spirit, Tsu. Torway, a handsome man touted for his marksmanship skills, who Ikta hates because he looks so good. He carries the wind spirit, Safi. Yatori spots a little girl near their door, which is puzzling, considering civilians are not allowed in their ship. Suddenly, they're violently thrown across the room, and Yatori notices that their cabin is flooding. They are quickly escorted to the lifeboats, but when Ikta sees the little girl fall overboard, he dives in to rescue her. When they awaken, they address the little girl as Camille, the 3rd princess of the Cat Varna Empire. Before they continue, a shivering Matthew asks if he can have his jacket back. While scouting their surroundings, Ikta and Torway learn that they're behind enemy lines at Kyoka. He suggests that surrendering is the last risky option, but Camille refuses to. Over the next few days, they do their best to survive on foraging and hunting. One afternoon, Camille helps Ikta build a hammock, which he lets her use. However, they spot a Kyoka scout blimp, and he hurriedly takes Camille to safety. That evening, Camille is nearly caught by Kyoka scouts, but Ikta reveals himself to attract their attention. Ikta pretends to be an asylum seeker, lowering the enemy's guards and allowing them to kill them one by one. Ikta interrogates one of the surviving scouts regarding the location of their base and blimp. He collects the soul stones of the enemy sprites, promising to return them to the nearest church. The next day, Ikta executes his brilliant plan. He pretends to be a Kyoka soldier who has captured enemies. He meets with the local commander and points out the runaway blimp. He lies and says that it was stolen, and its thief will only return if his family is allowed to return. Faced with a quick-time event, the commander decides to let them go. When they return to Cat Varna, they're hailed as heroes. 1 month later, Ikta and his friends lounge at the Imperial Palace. They then receive grim news. As Ikta had predicted, the eastern region of Cat Varna has fallen, and the famed General Riktan is killed in action. They're taken to the capital, Banahatal, where they're made Imperial Knights. Ikta is visibly infuriated. Camille later admits she used them as a political tool to raise morale, ever since the eastern region was defeated. She also reveals she knows quite a bit about Ikta, such as his father being Bata Sankre, a brilliant general who disobeyed orders and was executed as a result, Anne Rai, a blasphemous doctor he studied under who sought asylum in Kyoka, and Yuka, a woman taken from Kyoka as a prize and given to his father. Ikta is enraged and threatens to snap her neck, and Yatori is forced to hold him down. The other soldiers are given their old weapons back during the celebration party, which the late General Riktan had ordered retrieved in their behalf. Meanwhile, Ikta tells Yatori that in one day, he has become the 3 things he never wanted to be: a noble, a soldier, and a hero. As Imperial Knights, Ikta and the others are granted immediate admission into a prestigious officer school. Ikta suffers from the strenuous physical demands of training, but he excels in tactical lessons, impressing his classmates and leaving his professor speechless. Meanwhile, Torway shows impressive marksmanship and potential as a sniper. He runs into his brothers, Sarihaslag and Sushuraf. They call Torway a coward and doubt his usefulness during Camille's rescue. Ikta comes to his defense, provoking Sarihaslag into attacking by calling him an idiot. He buys enough time for Camille and Yatori to arrive, the latter of whom beats the remaining goons. Sarihaslag retreats for now, but he warns Ikta that this is not over. 3 months later, they're all given the chance to lead a platoon of soldiers in a military exercise. Ikta is assigned to the Light Troops 3rd Battalion, and he meets Sergeant Suya, whose mother he banged a few years ago. This loses him respect among his troops, and they refuse to follow his orders. Details regarding the mock battle are announced, pitting Ikta, Matthew, and Torway against Sarihaslag, Sushuraf, and Yatori. Ikta later speaks with Suya and learns that she refuses to let him command the platoon not out of a personal grudge, but because she believes his physical ineptitude makes him unfit to lead. He then proposes that if he can lead them to victory in the upcoming mock battle, she will let him command the platoon. But if he cannot, then he will take a desk job as she suggested. On the day of the mock battle, Ikta makes excellent marching time by having his platoon leave behind unnecessary equipment before making camp by the Kuriri River. His actions go against conventional military tactics, leaving Suya speechless. The next day, Sari Haslag is stunned to learn that Ikta has camped further south than where they were recommended to go. As Sari Haslag orders a hasty march down the river, Ikta prepares his troops for battle, on the day on which his genius was first shown to the world. When Sari Haslag and his men arrive at the Kuriri River, he sees a detachment of Ikta's men enter a nearby forest. He assumes that they are attempting a pincer movement, so he sends Yatori and her battalion to intercept him. Sari Haslag is confident that the river is a natural defensive barrier, especially since it rained the previous night. Unbeknownst to him, Ikta had felled some trees the previous night to create a nearly unseen bridge, allowing his men to make a frontal charge. The attack catches Sari Haslag off guard, and he himself is almost eliminated. He orders a general retreat, but Ikta claims a tactical victory. Frustrated, Sari Haslag orders an ambush deep in the forest, but Ikta has outmaneuvered him, placing his troops between them and the general exit, meaning they win by default if Sari Haslag is unable to make it back. He orders another march, but as he declares for his men to charge, Torway no-scopes him from a mile away. Ikta eventually wins the engagement, and his troops are overjoyed, but Ikta singles out 4 of his men, Gwemp, Aigi, Bayo, and Tobai, for disobeying his orders. He tells his men to follow him in his philosophy. A lazy war is an easy war, which is met with thunderous applause. Meanwhile, Camille is lured into a forest where she's betrayed and kidnapped by Captain Aisan. Fortunately, Yatori is quick to intercept them, and she threatens Aisan to let Camille go. He explains that they are former soldiers of General Rikdan. They kidnap the princess for revenge. Aisan overpowers Yatori, but Torway kills him from afar, allowing her to kill the remaining traitors like a hurricane. Ikta arrives in time to calm Yatori down, and he speaks to a dying Aisan, sympathizing with his motivations to kidnap Camille. Aisan remarks that Ikta's tactics are eerily similar to those of Bada's, but before he can reply, Aisan dies. He tries to cheer the princess up by saying she's red all over, but this makes her cry instead. In her youth, Yatori is sent abroad to study under Bada Sankre, where she first meets Ikta. It is also here that she meets the eccentric Dr. Anarai, who teaches her the basics of science, such as how to make new flavors of ice cream. Seeing as she's way too formal and stiff, Ikta invites her out to play, which involves playing pranks on generals and stealing supplies from the kitchen. He invites her to his home to play chess and dine with his family. Ikta invites Yatori to come be a scientist with him so they can uncover the secrets of the world, but she says her duty as an Ixim has always been to be a soldier in the army. One afternoon, they accompany Bajin and his wife on a survey in the mountains, but the pair return to the main camp after forgetting some vital tools. While they're away, Ikta and Yatori are trapped indoors by wolves. They have to use what little tools and wits they have to kill them all before Bajin returns. They set up elaborate home alone traps and fire on the walls from afar, but they begin to run low on ammunition, and the pack begin to overwhelm the thin wooden walls. When the pack finally breaks in, they retreat into a panic room, where Yatori considers sacrificing herself to let Ikta escape. He calls her decision foolish and promises to be her left hand. If they work together, they can be invincible. After setting the house on fire, they make it out and have a tense showdown against the last pair of wolves, but they lick their wounds and retreat with their young. Soon after that incident, Bada was arrested, while Ikta and his mother disappeared. But years later, she once again meets Ikta, who asks her to come with him. Ikta receives news that Anarai's box, a collection of research data, will soon be revealed. Haroma curiously asks what it is about, and he explains that as a part of Anarai's asylum deal with Kyoka, he must give them research with military applications. Thus, he predicts the release of Anarai's box will change the landscape of war. Later, Ikta, Matthew, and Torway discuss their upcoming 6-month assignment at the Northern Garrison, way up in the north. Matthew thinks it will be boring, with the only thing of note being the nearby Synax tribes, but Ikta tempts him with tales of the Synax matriarchal society, such as females entering your bed at night. When they arrive at the Northern Garrison, they're subjected to a lengthy speech by its commander, Lieutenant General Tamtux. During the banquet, they are introduced to Major Yukshiran, who assigns them their respective battalions during their stay there. Ikta meets First Lieutenant Senpa, a seedy-looking man, and his commander. Suddenly, Warrant Officer Dane-kun challenges and loses to Yatori in a duel. Ikta explains to his friends that the swordsmanship of the Ixim family is a testament to their invincibility, the proof being that they're the only family allowed to dual wield. He reminds Camille that no matter what her dreams may be, they are only possible because soldiers like Yatori fight to make them a reality. During a fielding exercise around the Sinic tribes, Senpa demonstrates the vastness of the Elaphatra Mountains, which serve as a natural defensive barrier. However, he notices that Ikta is missing. Ikta protects Private Kana from a corrupt commanding officer who is confiscating books to sell under the table. Ikta picks up a book that Dr. Anarai authored and considers Kana a fellow devotee. Senpa arrives and drags Ikta away from some disciplining, but he manages to struggle loose. In the process, he sees something disturbing in the dungeons. Meanwhile, Nanaku, the chieftain of the Sinic tribe, plots an attack on the northern garrison. Ikta returns to the mess hall a shriveled husk due to Senpa's punishment. As they tend to his wounds, Camille gives him a lap pillow, but he complains that he'd prefer someone with more meat in their legs. The next day, they're sent out on an escort mission. They stop at a nearby town, where it is revealed that Ikta stowed away and fell asleep in one of the carts. He takes Kana with him to tour the city, and learns that Lieutenant General Tamtux delegates most of his tasks to Major Yukshiram, but he takes personal charge whenever the Sinic tribe are involved. This coincides with what he saw in the dungeons, thousands of sprites stolen from the Sinic tribes, which Senpa says was Tamtuk's direct order. The act was meant to break their morale, and based on the lack of activity for 6 months, it seems to be working. Kana impresses Ikta with her analysis of the differences between their sprite worship and that of the Sinic tribes, namely the tribe's absence of reference to Alderamin, an almighty god. Meanwhile, Major Yukshiram and his men are ambushed by Sinic tribesmen. Yatori finds them all slaughtered and gives pursuit. Ikta and Kana arrive soon after, and he notices Alderamin pilgrim clothes that the Sinic left behind. Yatori chases the assassins to a nearby gorge, where she's confronted by Nanaku, who declares a rebellion and holy war against the Katvarna Empire, in retaliation for the repressive rule and, above all, the theft of their spirits. This news does not seem to shake Tamtux, who simply sees it as an opportunity to conduct a purge. Ikta is also skeptical of the war, noting that the term Holy War does not exist in the Sinic language. Instead, he suspects that someone else is directing them behind the scenes. The next day, Camille is sent to the rear for her own protection. She tells her friends that she wants to see them alive by the time she gets back. The war against the Sinic begins, but neither side could have anticipated that it would become one of the bloodiest civil conflicts in the Empire's history. Tamtux is frustrated that the campaign has lasted 3 weeks against what he perceives as inferior monkeys. Despite hundreds of casualties per day while fighting in unfamiliar high altitudes, he refuses to call a retreat. Ikta criticizes the upper brass's decision-making, and even more so when they are sent on an escort mission near the front lines. Elsewhere, Kana's unit finds an empty fortress. They're ordered to hold it. Ikta and his friends reunite with Aroma near the front. They are suddenly attacked at night by Sinic tribesmen. But their commanding officer, Hilmish, is clearly rattled. Ikta assumes control of the troops and organizes a stalwart defense, repelling and nearly annihilating the enemy with no casualties of his own. Meanwhile, Kana is looking forward to meeting with Ikta again, whom she holds in high regard. Suddenly, they're surrounded by the Sinic. The fortress was left empty on purpose to trap them in. With the camp taken, Ikta's supply train has no target. First Lieutenant Najiru demands that the fortress be taken and orders Ikta's unit to perform recon. But Ikta retorts that if he's given command of all platoons present, he can retake the entire fortress in an hour. Using the new air rifles that Inari developed, Torway and his sharpshooters whittle down the enemy from afar. With the Sinic's artillery and suppressive fire gone, Ikta orders a frontal assault, and he retakes the fortress in record time, as promised. However, he has no time to rest, as he receives a distress report to save a garrison further up. In order to prevent alpine sickness, he delays their march by 2 days, so that his troops have time to adapt to the high altitude. When he arrives, he finds the entire garrison slaughtered. He's distraught to discover Kana's signature hair tie and her dead body nearby. When Ikta and his group arrive at the front lines, they meet Senda, recently promoted to captain. He combines their various platoons into one company and assigns Ikta to be its commander. He tells them that the war has entered its final stages, which will culminate in a 3-pronged attack up the mountain path at the main Sinic village. His first job is settling fire to the homes of Sinic villagers. Although the job is disgusting, Ikta is more critical of Tamtuk's strategy, which he calls dreadfully unscientific. While herding the villagers into refugee camps, Ikta is attacked by a small boy out of anger, but Dane-kun manages to defuse the situation. While setting up camp, Matthew asks them how they satisfy their needs. Are they heroes that bond with others, or lonely warriors? As they joke back and forth, Matthew declares he's a lonely warrior, prompting a full salute from the entire company. While ascending the mountains, Ikta manages to convince Senda to suggest that they deploy shields on their flanks to protect against projectiles. Suddenly, they're beset from nearly all sides by unseen sharpshooters and Syanak tribesmen. Realizing that the other side also has air rifles, Ikta orders Torway to lay down suppressive fire. The Kalakarm, an elite assassin unit of the Kyoka, attacks, with Tam-Tux as their target. Yatori duels against Nanaku, whose bizarre swordsplay confuses her at first, but she realizes the trick and kills her wind spirit, robbing her of her mobility. However, this causes an explosion, and Nanaku escapes into chaos. However, Yatori is distracted when she sees Dane-kun being attacked, and with Torway's sharpshooters, they drive off Kala and his men. But the damage is done, and Dane-kun is killed in action. Nanaku limps back to her village, anguished that she was not even able to retrieve her spirit's soulstone, but she's horrified to find her home in flames. 9 years prior, Nanako pays a night visit to Ikta, who was visiting her village. Back in the present, Nanako bitterly fights off the invaders who raided her home, but she's pinned down. Before she's assaulted, Ikta intervenes and rescues her. The war is officially declared over, and the soldiers exhale a heavy sigh of relief. However, cavalry from the neighboring Holy Aldera Empire, responding to reports of abuse against spirits, suddenly declares war. Tam-Tux is speechless, and initial reports confirm that a large Alderan army, numbering 12,000, is marching on the exhausted Katvarna forces. With less than 8,000 men remaining, Senda, with Ikta's assistance, draws up a plan for a retreat, which include a delaying force of about 600 men. However, they still have a shortage of manpower, which Ikta volunteers to fill. He frees Nanako, and using a Syanak custom of apology, he cuts off his finger as a way of apology. Nanako realizes he's the same Ikta from years ago, and is overjoyed to see him. Ikta requests reinforcements from her, reasoning that if the Alderans occupy their territory, they will surely snuff out the heretical beliefs of the Syanak. This all but confirms Ikta's suspicions. The Kyoka Empire was manipulating things from behind the scenes. He guarantees religious tolerance in the aftermath, and Nanako agrees. When Ikta returns, Senda reveals that he and Yatori have been promoted to first lieutenants, while Matthew, Hiroma, and Torway are now second lieutenants. After finalizing their delaying strategy, Ikta sets fire to the great Gagal Kasakan forest, the only path the Alderan army had. The brazen and unexpected setback stuns the Alderan generals. They call for Radiant Officer Jean, an officer from the Kyoka army. He is a strategic genius, said to be not only Ikta's equal, but also his antithesis, as he's known for his hard work and sleepless drive. He acts quickly and sends another fire on the opposite side to extinguish the previous one. Jean is impressed by Katvarna's decision to burn the forest, and suspects that a brilliant tactician he can consider as equal is on the other side. With the fire expected to die down soon, Ikta devises a plan designed to lure the Alderan center into a thickly wood forest, where they erect a garrison. This act to draw them out to open battle is to prevent them from exploiting a mountain pass that goes behind their flanks, which their force is incapable of holding. That night, the Alderans attack, but the first wave was merely sent to erect wooden stakes to neutralize their cannons. Senda sends out Yatori and Nanaku to remove the stakes, but Nanaku goes too far forward and is nearly killed by air rifle fire, injuring Matthew in the shoulder. Things become complicated when the Alderans bring out a siege ladder, which they lack the firepower to stop. Critically, the Syanak are overextended due to Nanaku's misstep, and he considers abandoning them for a moment. However, upon seeing Yatori also in the field, he orders his men to charge. Laying down suppressive fire, they manage to drag back the wounded, and they set fire to their barricade. Although they failed to capitalize on their advantages, Jean still considers it a tactical victory. He now knows the Katvarna have a brilliant general on their side. The operation and Ikta's orders cost them dozens of casualties. When Sayu reports to Ikta the loss of 3 men from his own 3rd Light Brigade, her indifference infuriates her. She questions his judgment in risking lives to save the Syanak, but Yatori defends him and clarifies that she was also responsible in choosing to rescue them. She understands Sayu's anger and explains that in war, you often have to follow orders even if they conflict with your own values. Sayu asks Yatori if ordered, would she kill Ikta? She replies, without hesitation. Jean reveals information that Yatori is on the enemy side and assumes she must be responsible for the tactical genius he's witnessing. Meanwhile, Nanaku offers to cut off both her hands to atone for the deaths of Sayu's comrades, but she replies that she wouldn't be able to live with herself. She didn't realize that joining the army would mean fighting pointless battles. Later on, they receive reports of an Alderan cavalry unit numbering 500 approaching their flank. Senda volunteers to gather a force to intercept them, confident that Ikta would make way more sound decisions than him. To bolster his force, he takes Torway's sharpshooter platoon. Ikta galvanizes his troops and initiates a mobile war of defense. They're tasked with holding their positions for 7 days, and he takes it upon himself to preach the way of a lazy war. On day 3 of their timeline, Matthew's unit finally makes contact with an enemy Alderan unit. While another detachment is besieging Senda's position, who is now bolstered by 6 air mortars from the Synak. However, Ikta is concerned about reports of a blimp and 300 cavalrymen circling a single area for the past 3 days. Meanwhile, Torway manages to foil an attempt by the Kala Karm to assassinate their rear by setting up their own ambush. The Kyokan unit is caught completely by surprise. They're annihilated. The Alderaan army at the front of the fortress orders an attack anyway. Ikta receives news of his victory with relief, and he later eats dinner with the Attori, back to back as they always have. He wonders if the age of the sword is drawing to a close, but he reassures her that he will always have her back. The next day, Ikta is astounded to learn that the Alderaans have brought terrifying air howitzers to bear, which are supposedly more taboo from them to use than blimps. But he's even more surprised when cavalry units spring out of the firewall, and he realizes that the cavalry units from earlier were conducting movement exercises. He clenches his teeth. They've got him good. With 2 days still left before the Cat Vorna rear guard can retreat, 300 Alderaan cavalry steam in. With their backs against the wall, Ikta leaves Matthew in charge of the mobile defense plan and takes Yatori and Anaka on a special operation. Ikta lures Jean's troops to draw closer to their lines. Jean notices the path covered in straw with the smell of oil and assumes that it is a simple fire attack. He orders his troops to slowly advance, but Ikta's men burst from underneath the straw, catching his troops completely by surprise. With their mobility and range advantage gone, the battlefield descends into chaos. Ikta sends out a flag signal saying they're willing to negotiate, which as planned plays into Jean's personality. Jean agrees to a discussion of terms. He's surprised to learn that Yatori is not the commander, but Ikta. Jean requests their immediate surrender, while Ikta demands that they withdraw to the other side of the forest so their vanguard can retreat. When Jean refuses, he threatens to kill him using Torway, a marksman from the reputed Remion family. Even though Jean is 90% sure it is a bluff, he knows he cannot discount the 10% chance, and he agrees to Ikta's demands. The bluff pays off. Ikta leaves Jean with a word of advice. Overwork is the death of every hero, and he retorts that he will spend his life proving Ikta wrong. But just as Ikta says this, he collapses from his wounds and exhaustion. While retreating down the mountain, Ikta is attacked by Nerva, the last surviving member of the Kala Karm. He challenges Yatori to a duel, and he shows exceptional swordsmanship that rivals hers. However, she shows her true skill. The way of the blank sword, which makes it impossible for him to read his movements. He dies, having no regret about having fought a powerful warrior. When they return, Camille's overjoyed to see her friends all in one piece, except Ikta, who has lost his pinky. In the aftermath, Temtux is court-martialed and scheduled to be executed for his incompetence and selfishness. Later, Camille asks Ikta what he thinks of the Cat Vorna Empire. He replies that it is in decline, gets more corrupt by the day, and is filled with incompetence. Upon hearing his answer, she makes a strange request. She asks Ikta to rise to the highest ranks of the military, after which she will have him lose the war in a way that will attract Kyokan values to the Empire. Thus begins Ikta's greatest challenge as a strategist and tactician, to lose the war without losing it completely. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.